In the heart of Iliwa City, everyone knew one name, King Adekunle. Powerful, rich, respected, and untouchable, he ruled a city where wealth and status spoke louder than words. But behind the walls of his palace lived Princess Zaina, a young woman raised in luxury and isolation, whose heart carried a question no one could answer. Do people respect me or only my crown? One afternoon, as she watched the bustling Makoro Central Market, Zaina witnessed a poor woman being shoved and humiliated by the king's guards. No one stepped in. No one cared. That night, Zaina made a life-changing decision. She disguised herself in rags, covered her face with dust, and vanished into the crowd. For the first time, she felt invisible, mocked, ignored, and utterly alone, until she met a young man. What happens next will reveal the true meaning of humanity. Watch till the end to see how one encounter changes everything. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more unbelievable stories you won't find anywhere else. In the heart of Iliwa City, where glass towers rose beside rusted rooftops and traffic horns blended with street prayers, power had a single face and a single name, King Adekunle. His portraits watched over government buildings. His voice opened national broadcasts, and his decisions shaped the daily rhythm of the city. To the wealthy, he was a symbol of stability. To the poor, he was distant authority, firm, untouchable, unquestioned. Iliwa City respected order above compassion, and success above humanity. Markets overflowed with noise and color, but silence lived in the hearts of those no one noticed. In this city, people learned early that respect was earned by what you owned, not who you were. A clean suit spoke louder than a clean heart. A convoy commanded more honor than a kind word. And so the city moved forward, fast and proud, never pausing long enough to ask who was being left behind. Inside the royal compound, behind high walls crowned with electric wire and quiet guards, lived Princess Zaina, the only daughter of the king. She had been raised carefully, intentionally, like a rare jewel locked in a glass case. From childhood, her days were measured by lessons, etiquette, and expectations. Tutors taught her history, economics, diplomacy, and how to smile without revealing too much. Elders praised her posture before they praised her thoughts. Ministers bowed, servants lowered their eyes, and visitors addressed her with titles heavy enough to suffocate a soul. She wore beautiful clothes, yet felt unseen inside them. At night, when the palace quieted and generators hummed like distant insects, Zaina often stood by her window, watching the city lights flicker like uncertain stars. Somewhere out there, people were laughing, struggling, surviving. She wondered what it felt like to walk freely, without escort or announcement. What it felt like to be greeted without fear or praised without obligation. Slowly, painfully, a question began to live inside her, not loud but persistent. If I were no one, would anyone still see me? King Adekunle loved his daughter, but love, in his world, was expressed through protection and distance. He believed the city was safest when everyone knew their place. Order, to him, was kindness in its strongest form. He spoke often of discipline, of structure, of maintaining respect. When reports crossed his desk about street unrest or market disputes, he approved stronger patrols, not softer solutions. To him, chaos was the greatest enemy, and weakness was an invitation to disorder. Zaina listened to these conversations from across long tables, absorbing every word, yet her heart resisted their certainty. She had noticed how the palace spoke about the people, but rarely to them, how policies were discussed in numbers, not names. She remembered moments from childhood, brief flashes, when she had waved at street children from behind tinted glass, only to see guards shoo them away. Those memories returned now with weight. Respect, she realized, had become performative. People bowed not because they felt reverence, but because power demanded it. And the more she understood this, the more isolated she felt. Surrounded by voices, she felt unheard. Surrounded by honor, she felt untested. The turning point came on an ordinary afternoon, under an unforgiving sun, at Makoro Central Market. Zaina had insisted on accompanying her father on a brief city inspection. Curious to see the city without ceremony, the market was alive. Traders shouting prices, women balancing baskets, men arguing over coins. Then the noise shifted. A poor woman, thin and tired, had been begging near a vendor's stall. When guards approached, she did not move fast enough. A shove followed. Then another. The woman fell, her goods scattering like forgotten promises across the ground. Laughter rose from somewhere. Indifference from everywhere else. Zaina froze. She waited for anyone, to help. No one did. The convoy moved on. That night, the image refused to leave her. The woman's eyes. Not angry, not pleading, just resigned. Lying awake, Zaina felt something crack open inside her. She finally understood what her life of comfort had hidden from her. This city did not lack rules. It lacked empathy. And if a princess could witness such pain and remain unchanged, then the crown meant nothing at all. By dawn, she had made a decision, one that would strip her of everything she had ever been, in order to discover who she truly was. By dawn, the decision Zaina had made the night before no longer felt like a thought. It felt like a command. The palace stirred slowly as it always did. Servants sweeping courtyards, guards changing shifts, the world of order resuming its quiet rhythm. Inside her room, Princess Zaina stood before a mirror and saw someone she barely recognized. Not because she was changing yet, but because she finally understood how little of herself that reflection had ever shown. She opened drawers filled with jewelry and closed them again. Gold would speak too loudly. Silk would tell too many lies. She chose simple, faded clothes from storage, garments once donated and never worn. Slowly, deliberately, she removed every mark of privilege. Rings, earrings, even her posture softened, shoulders lowering as if releasing years of expectation. When she stepped out through a side gate, unnoticed by the guards who had memorized only her formal exits, she did not feel brave. She felt exposed. For the first time in her life, no one announced her presence. No doors opened for her. The city did not pause. Iliwa City moved on, unaware that a princess had just vanished into its streets. The walk toward Makoro Central Market was longer than she expected. Without a car, distance revealed itself honestly. Heat pressed down on her skin. Dust clung to her sandals. People brushed past without apology, their faces fixed on survival, not courtesy. Zaina tried to imitate their pace, their expressions, but she felt like a visitor learning a foreign language too late in life. When she reached the market, the noise hit her fully. Shouting vendors, clattering carts, music blaring from old speakers, arguments breaking and dissolving in seconds. She found a corner near a broken wall and sat down, knees pulled close, heart pounding louder than the market itself. This was the same place she had watched from behind glass the day before. Now there was no glass, no separation, only reality. A man passed and glanced at her, then looked away. Another laughed and pointed, whispering something to his friend. A woman stepped around her, as if she were an object left behind. Hours passed, measured not by clocks but by hunger, by thirst, by the slow, aching realization that no one was coming to ask if she was all right. As the sun climbed higher, so did the cruelty, not always loud but consistent. A vendor chased her from the shade, accusing her of scaring customers. A boy mimicked her posture, drawing laughter from others. Someone tossed a coin at her feet, not as help, but as dismissal. Work. A voice snapped, sharp and final. Don't sit there like death waiting. Zaina wanted to speak, to explain, to remind them she was human, but the words stayed locked inside her chest. She began to understand something painful and profound. Invisibility was not the absence of sight, but the absence of interest. People saw her, but she did not register as someone worth acknowledging. Her stomach tightened with hunger she had never known, not the polite hunger of delayed meals, but the desperate, hollow ache that demanded attention. She pressed her hands into the dirt to steady herself, shocked by how quickly dignity eroded when survival took priority. This city, she realized, did not hate the poor. It simply had no time for them. By late afternoon, exhaustion replaced fear. Zaina's body slumped forward, her thoughts slowing, her pride dissolving into something quieter and heavier. She had imagined this experience as a test she controlled. Instead, it was consuming her. She noticed how her voice had changed, softer, uncertain, when she tried to ask for water, how her eyes avoided others, instinctively protecting what little strength remained. She saw guards in the distance, uniforms familiar, and for a moment her chest tightened with instinctive relief. Then they passed her without recognition, without pause, without care. The realization struck hard. If something happened to her here, there would be no sirens, no announcements, no urgent search. The city would continue breathing, indifferent. Tears welled in her eyes, not dramatic, not loud, but heavy with understanding. So this is what it means, she thought, to exist without protection. She had stepped outside her name, and the world had responded by erasing her. As evening crept in, shadows stretching long across the market ground, Zaina sat motionless, afraid that standing might reveal how weak she had become. Her mouth was dry. Her head throbbed. Around her, stalls closed one by one, the crowd thinning as people returned to homes she could only imagine. The laughter faded. The music softened. And in the quiet left behind, a terrible clarity settled in her chest. This was not a lesson she could pause or rewind. She had crossed a line that separated observation from experience. For the first time since leaving the palace, doubt whispered to her, "What if I cannot endure this?" The city offered no answer, only the sound of footsteps passing by. And then, among them, one pair slowed. Not hurried, not dismissive, just present. Zaina did not look up yet. She did not know it. But the next moment would mark the beginning of something she had not planned for. Not power, not revelation, but a different kind of wealth she had never been taught to recognize. The footsteps stopped just a short distance away, close enough for Princess Zaina to sense a presence without lifting her head. She had learned quickly that stillness was safer than curiosity. For a moment, nothing happened. No insult, no command to move. Just silence, the kind that feels intentional. Then a voice came, calm and unhurried, cutting gently through the fading noise of Makoro's central market. "Have you eaten today?" It was not loud. It did not carry authority or pity. It was simply a question, offered the way one might offer shade on a hot day. Zaina hesitated, unsure how to respond without revealing the tremor in her voice. She shook her head slowly. The man crouched down, bringing himself to her level instead of towering above her. That small act unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. From the corner of her eye, she saw him unwrap a modest parcel of food, rice, beans, nothing extravagant, and place it between them. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetically, "but it's better shared than wasted." His name, she would soon learn, was Kalu, and in that moment, without knowing it, he broke the wall the city had spent all day building around her. Zaina ate slowly, each bite grounding her back into her body. Hunger dulled, but something deeper stirred awake. Kalu did not stare while she ate. He did not rush her. He sat beside her, elbows resting on his knees, watching the last of the market vendors pack away their goods. In the dimming light, he looked ordinary, worn shoes, calloused hands, eyes that had seen disappointment without surrendering to it. When she finally spoke, her voice surprised her with its softness. "Why did you stop?" she asked. He shrugged, as if the answer required no thought. "Because I saw you." The simplicity of the response left her momentarily speechless. In Iliwa City, seeing had never meant acknowledging. Kalu began to talk, not about himself at first, but about the market, which stalls were fair, which cheats to avoid, how the city had changed over the years. His words carried no bitterness, only acceptance. Zaina listened, absorbing not just his story, but his rhythm. This was a man who survived by reading people, by knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. When he finally asked her name, she hesitated, then offered a false one, light and fragile on her tongue. Kalu nodded, accepting it without question, as if names mattered less than presence. Over the next few days, Kalu returned, not always at the same time, not always with food, but always with intention. Sometimes he brought tea in a cracked plastic cup. Sometimes he brought news, which streets were dangerous, which corners were safe. Sometimes he brought nothing but conversation. Zaina watched him carefully, waiting for the moment kindness turned into expectation. It never came. He never asked her to move, never asked for gratitude, never demanded a story. Instead, he spoke about his life in fragments, growing up without parents, learning early that survival required flexibility, not cruelty. The street teaches you, he said once, but it doesn't have to harden you. Zaina found herself responding, cautiously at first, then more openly. She spoke of loneliness without context, of being surrounded yet unseen. Kalu listened the way people rarely do, not to respond, but to understand. And slowly, without realizing it, she began to feel something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not safety, not relief, but recognition. Still, doubt lingered. Zaina reminded herself why she was there. This was a test, not a refuge. One afternoon, she pressed him deliberately, her voice edged with frustration. "Don't you think people only care about money?" she asked, watching his face closely. "That without it, you're nothing?" Kalu smiled, not dismissively, but with a sadness that suggested he had wrestled with the same thought many times before. "Money buys noise," he said. "Respect comes quietly." He gestured around them. The cracked pavement, the fading stalls, the children chasing one another through dust. "Look here, the loudest people have the least peace." His words settled between them, heavy and true. Zaina felt something inside her shift. For years, she had been taught that value is displayed through wealth, through influence, through control. Here was a man with none of those things, yet rich in a way she had never encountered. She wondered, not for the first time, how different her life might have been if she had learned this language sooner. As the days passed, Zaina noticed changes in herself. She slept lighter, but with less fear. She laughed, quietly, unexpectedly, at Kalu's dry humor. She began to anticipate his arrival, then caught herself, wary of attachment. What would happen when this ended? What would happen when truth replaced disguise? The question haunted her. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the market in gold, Kalu prepared to leave earlier than usual. "Be careful tonight," he said. "The streets change after dark." Zaina nodded, suddenly aware of how much his presence had anchored her. As he walked away, she felt the weight of the choice she had made days ago settle fully into her bones. This was no longer just an experiment. It was a confrontation with herself, with the city, with the meaning of dignity. And somewhere between shared meals and unspoken understanding, she realized the most dangerous truth of all. If Kalu ever discovered who she truly was, everything would change. The question was not whether he would still respect her. It was whether she would still deserve the respect she was finally earning. The question stayed with Princess Zaina long after Kalu disappeared into the thinning crowd. Night wrapped the market in cooler air and longer shadows, and with it came a sharper edge to everything. Zaina slept lightly, alert to footsteps, to laughter that cut too close, to the scrape of shoes on concrete. By morning, she knew something had shifted, not just within her, but around her. Whispers followed her now. A few traders eyed her with suspicion, as if her quiet endurance unsettled them. She no longer begged, no longer shrank. She sat upright, met gazes, spoke when spoken to. It was subtle, but it mattered. People sensed it. In Iliwa City, deviation from the expected was treated like an offense. By midday, a market supervisor approached, his tone sharp. "You've been here too long," he said. "You're not like the others." Zaina answered calmly, choosing each word with care. "I sit where there is space." The man scoffed, threatened to call the guards, and walked away. The threat lingered, heavy as humidity. Zaina felt it settle in her chest. The city was beginning to push back. Kalu noticed it too. He arrived later than usual, eyes scanning before he sat beside her. "They're watching you," he said quietly, offering tea without ceremony. "Some people don't like mirrors." She almost smiled at that, then stopped herself. Her presence here was no longer neutral. It was a challenge. Over the next days, pressure built in small, relentless ways. Vendors complained that customers avoided their stalls. A group of boys mocked her more aggressively, emboldened by adult indifference. One afternoon, a guard paused in front of her, hand resting on his baton, eyes searching her face for recognition that did not come. He moved on, unsettled. Kalu grew more protective, stepping between her and rising hostility. You don't owe them explanations, he told her. But Zaina felt the weight of consequence. She had come to observe, not disrupt, yet truth, once present, disrupted everything. Each night, she weighed the same fear, that Kalu might be punished for kindness, that her experiment might cost him more than it cost her. And still she stayed. The breaking point arrived without ceremony, as such moments often do. A dispute erupted nearby. A vendor accused a customer of theft. Voices rose. A crowd gathered. In the chaos, someone pointed at Zaina. She's the problem. A voice shouted. She brings bad luck. The accusation spread quickly, feeding on frustration and fear. A guard pushed through, eyes hard. Move, he ordered. Zaina stood slowly, heart pounding but posture steady. I have done nothing, she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. The guard laughed. You beg here every day and say nothing is wrong? Kalu stepped forward before she could stop him. She's not begging, he said. She's sitting, like anyone else. The guard's gaze snapped to him. For a moment, time tightened. Zaina felt the full danger of the situation, not to herself, but to him. A wrong word could end Kalu's freedom. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth pressed against her ribs, urgent and heavy. The city watched, waiting to see who would yield. Sirens cut through the tension. Not police, something heavier. A convoy. Heads turned. The crowd parted instinctively as black vehicles rolled into Makoro Central Market, engines humming with authority. Zaina recognized the sound before she saw the insignia. Her breath caught. The city seemed to hold itself still. Guards snapped to attention. Traders lowered their voices. And then he stepped out. King Adekunle himself, presence undeniable, gaze sweeping the scene with practiced control. He had come expecting disorder. What he found instead was silence thick with expectation. Zaina felt the moment stretch, fragile as glass. She could retreat now. Let the guards remove her. Let the story end quietly. Or she could step forward and let the truth fall where it may. She thought of the woman who had been pushed days ago, of Kalu's steady kindness, of the city's practiced indifference, and she understood, with sudden clarity, that invisibility had taught her more than any throne ever could. She stepped out from the crowd. Slowly, deliberately, the guards tensed. The king's eyes narrowed, searching her face. Zaina lifted her head and wiped the dust from her cheeks, revealing the features the palace knew well, but the market did not. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady. Father, she said. The word cut through the air like a blade. A ripple moved through the crowd, disbelief, confusion, fear. King Adekunle froze, then took a step closer, recognition dawning with something like shame. This, he said, his voice quieter than anyone expected, is my daughter. Gasps followed. Heads bowed. The guard who had threatened her stepped back, color draining from his face. Zaina looked at the people who had laughed, ignored, accused. I came here without my name, she said, addressing them all. You showed me who we are when no one is watching. The king stood beside her, the weight of the city settling onto his shoulders. For the first time in years, authority felt small. The truth had been spoken, and Iliwa City could no longer look away. The silence that followed Zaina's revelation did not break quickly. It settled over Makoro Central Market, like a truth too heavy to ignore. People stood frozen, eyes lowered, minds racing backward through every laugh, every shove, every moment of indifference they wished they could reclaim. King Adekunle looked around and, for the first time in his reign, did not see order. He saw distance. He saw fear disguised as respect. He saw a city that had learned obedience but forgotten compassion. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his cap and held it at his side, a small gesture, but one that rippled through the crowd. My daughter walked this city without protection, he said, his voice carrying without force. And what she found was not crime alone, but neglect. Guards shifted uneasily. Traders held their breath. Zaina stood beside him, no longer hidden, yet strangely lighter than she had ever felt. Power, the king continued, is not proven by how loudly we command, but by how carefully we listen. He turned toward the guards who had pushed the poor woman days earlier, toward the supervisor who had threatened Zaina, toward the systems he himself had built. Consequences were named, measured, lawful, unavoidable. Not spectacle, not revenge, but accountability. The city watched as authority corrected itself in public. In that moment, Iliwa City learned something rare. That leadership could kneel before truth without collapsing. Then the king called for Kalu. The name traveled to the crowd in murmurs until Kalu stepped forward, hands clenched, eyes wide with uncertainty. He had already imagined punishment. He had lived long enough to expect it. The king studied him for a moment that felt endless, then placed a hand on his shoulder. Not as ceremony, but as acknowledgement. "You treated my daughter as a human before you knew her worth," he said. "That is the kind of wealth no treasury can store." Kalu tried to speak, failed, swallowed hard. He shook his head slightly, as if refusing a gift too heavy to carry. "I only shared what I had," he said quietly. Zaina felt her throat tighten. She stepped forward then, meeting his eyes without disguise, without distance. "You saw me," she said, "when the city did not." The king announced no riches, no titles. Instead, he ordered something subtler: protection for honest traders, reform and market oversight, training that emphasized dignity over force. And to Kalu, he offered choice, not command, support to grow, or freedom to remain. Kalu chose freedom. The crowd exhaled as one. This was not a fairy tale reward. It was respect, offered without strings. As the convoy departed and the market slowly returned to life, Zaina remained behind, standing where she had once sat unseen. People approached her differently now, cautiously, thoughtfully, unsure how to address someone who had been both invisible and royal. She greeted them not as a symbol, but as a witness. In the days that followed, changes moved through Iliwa City like careful footsteps. Not loud, not perfect, but real. Guards learned restraint. Markets gained voices. Policies acquired faces. Zaina returned to the palace, but the walls felt different now. Less like shelter, more like responsibility. She refused isolation, insisted on walking the city openly, without convoys whenever possible. King Adekunle watched her with a mixture of pride and humility, understanding at last that order without empathy was just another form of blindness. And somewhere in the city, Kalu continued his life, selling, surviving, smiling, known now not for his poverty, but for his character. The story spread, as stories do, carried by voices rather than announcements. And in time, it became a quiet proverb whispered through Iliwa City. When the crown disappears, the heart is revealed.